The spinnerbait and the chatterbait. Old school versus new school. I hated school, but not this kind of school. In this video, I'm gonna break down the differences and similarities between these two reaction style lures, teaching you everything you need to know. And at the end, I'm actually gonna go on the water to test which of these two lures is better, helping you guys understand which one to choose for your body of water and of course, catch more bass. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it.
Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all.
I can't believe what I just caught.
Yes!
Well, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to TRF. This episode is brought to you by my merch brand called Infinite Outdoors. I'll talk a little more about this brand here in a little bit. So the spinnerbait and the chatterbait, two very similar lures in the sense that they can be retrieved fast. They're very versatile. They catch fish in ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams, everything in between. But there are some very obvious differences, especially when it comes to the components. So let's start first with the differences in design and build. Starting first with the old school, the spinnerbait. The spinnerbait really is a simple lure that's composed of just a few main things. Of course, it has a lead or some kind of metal head that is wrapped around a wire. Now, the wire is what the entire bait is based around. The wire can be thin, it can be thick, but it's usually in some kind of V pattern that has 1 to 2 blades, either secured by split rings or swivels or both. There's usually some component, whether it's plastic or metal, that is separating the two blades, keeping them apart as it's retrieved. There is a bend in the metal where you actually tie your line to. Following the wire down, you have a head with a skirt attached and usually some kind of bait keeper, and then of course your hook, because it's not a fishing lure if you can't get them in the boat. So if that's the spinnerbait, what is different about the chatterbait? Well, pretty much everything. The chatterbait does not have any kind of wire at all. Matter of fact, it's more built around the head more than anything. So you have a head, again, of usually lead or tungsten. There is some kind of connection between the head and the blade. On the blade, you have some kind of snap or split ring to tie your line to, and then following the head down, you have a bait keeper and of course your hook, along with a skirt, usually tied on in a similar way with a rubber band or a wire tie, just like the spinnerbait has. Now, one thing to understand about the chatterbait is that it actually falls into the category of vibrating jig. That is really the term I should be using to teach this. The word chatterbait, even though that is made by Z-Man, has kind of taken a hold of the entire category. So I'm gonna keep calling it chatterbait, even though it's a vibrating jig. But Z-Man still owns the patent, who knows for how long, but on the main system on the chatterbait. So the blade actually attaches directly to the head on all Z-Man and Z-Man associated vibrating jigs. So the Strike King, this here is the Tungsten Thunder Cricket. I work with Strike King. Strike King pays a royalty to Z-Man to be able to use the actual connection system here to make sure it's a nice compact package. And in my opinion, and the vast majority of pro anglers out there either use the Strike King or the Z-Man because they just sound and work the best. But Tyler, there are many different brands that make a vibrating jig that don't use Z-Man's technology. How are they doing that? Well, they are skirting the patent restrictions by not actually connecting the blade to the head in the exact same way. The ones that come to mind are the Berkeley Slobber Knocker, the Booyah Melee, the Guggen Clickbait, Omega Rapture. I'm sure other ones exist out there, but for the most part, they don't get in trouble with Z-Man because they actually use a variety of split rings. I know the Omega uses an actual, like, a swivel. Guggen uses whatever the heck that is, but again, there's many different ways to have a chatterbait without actually infringing on the design and patent of Z-Man's. I actually like the Strike King, pay Z-Man, because it means the Thunder Cricket is a better lure than it could be otherwise. But that right there is just scratching the surface when it comes to the build differences between the spinnerbait and the chatterbait. I want to dive a whole lot deeper into the actual build of a spinnerbait when it comes to the wire type and the blade size. Like I mentioned, a spinning blade is crucial to the actual function of a spinnerbait, and you've got many different sizes, types, shapes, and colors. For the most part though, Indiana kind of being in the middle, with Colorado and Willow being the two kind of polar opposites. Those are the three main styles of spinnerbait blades. For the most part, the ones coming in the package out of the store are going to be either Willow or Colorado, sometimes double Willow, sometimes double Colorado, and sometimes a mixture of the two. Now, Tyler, which blade is best? And the answer to that is yes. Next question, Tyler, which wire diameter is best? Also, the answer is yes. All I can say is that there are tons of different combinations of blade size, shape, and wire diameter, and you really have to find what works on your body of water for your fish and your cover and structure. Again, there are so many variations. But where there's not variation, really, for the most part, is on the chatterbait blade. Several brands make like a mini size blade, and some make a stealth that's usually made of plastic or resin. But for the most part, I'm talking about the 5 years I've spent on the road with professional anglers, they almost all use the same size and style of blade, which is about a 1 to a 1.5 inch blade size. There's not a whole lot of variance, especially in terms of head size and shape. It's usually an archy style head. Again, I don't think it's advantageous, really, to use any kind of crazy chatterbait. Matter of fact, what the heck is this one I saw in Tackle Warehouse? One of the reviews on that style chatterbait actually said it catches one thing, and that is the angler. So I think, again, from personal experience, the vast majority of the time, just use a standard vibrating jig. Maybe go down to a mini size if you want a more finesse presentation, but there's a whole lot less differentiation in the design of a vibrating jig as there is a spinnerbait. But really, the way it comes out of the package is probably good enough for the majority of bodies of water that you fish. The next thing I want to discuss is the actual size and how much water it displaces, as well as the noise it makes in the water. How loud is it? So a spinnerbait is not actually a louder lure, even though as I shake it close to the microphone and then shake that one, the spinnerbait sounds like a louder lure. That is just above the water. When you actually get these things beneath the water, in the vast majority of cases, again, comparing a normal spinnerbait to a normal vibrating jig, a normal chatterbait, you're gonna find the spinnerbait is actually a quieter lure. Now, Tyler, does that mean it is not as good in dirty water because the fish need to hear a super loud, noise to find it and eat it? Not necessarily the case, because a spinnerbait, as being a larger lure in the water, it actually, for the most part, displaces more water. And fish don't just feed based on sight and sound. They also feed based on what they feel around them. And sometimes they need a larger water displacing lure to find it, not necessarily a sound. So again, there's a whole lot of variance here. You may find that on one body of water that's dirty, a vibrating jig works better. And on the other body of water, a spinnerbait works better. And the water clarity and conditions look the exact same. So you're confused why one's working better than the other. Welcome to fishing. Now, moving on to colors and trailers with both of these lures. So a spinnerbait, for the most part, is advertised, and in terms of color selection, mostly comes in baitfish variations. So this one here is a chartreuse and white. You've got grays and glimmers and straight whites and straight chartreuses. Those are what I would call baitfish imitators. So your shads, your minnows, any kind of baitfish thing. A bluegill, in my mind, is not a baitfish. Maybe that's not the right technical category, but for me, a baitfish is some kind of a white lure. And so if you're gonna look at why companies advertise and sell the majority of spinnerbaits in baitfish colors, I think it's because they've done the research, both scientific and anecdotal, to just know that baitfish are better imitated by a spinnerbait than they are a vibrating jig. Now, a vibrating jig also does come in baitfish colors, and I haven't really found that one is advertised more than the other. I just think if you're gonna look at baitfish versus crawfish and bluegill, vibrating jig is probably better at that than a spinnerbait is, oftentimes because bluegills and crawfish are more on the bottom and baitfish are more in the column. And we're gonna talk about retrieve here in a little bit. These lures are kind of more column oriented versus bottom oriented. Again, if you have a bluegill colored spinnerbait and your bass are eating nothing but bluegill, you can still catch them on that. But I think just looking on what sells most in these two, the bluegill crawfish is gonna be more oriented towards a vibrating jig, and the baitfish more so a spinnerbait. Matter of fact, this one actually has two blades on it that look more like a baitfish than anything a vibrating jig could. And for trailers, a spinnerbait does not need one, but can have one, as opposed to a vibrating jig that can have one and does need one. I have caught fish without a trailer on a vibrating jig, but especially at higher retrieve speeds, it seems like a vibrating jig needs some weight, some bulk on the back of it to actually keep it running straight and running true, whereas a spinnerbait does not. So do I throw a trailer on a spinnerbait? I would say 20-30% of the time I do, but it's not needed. It still works just fine without one. But if you want better casting distance and actually keeping it lower in the water column, a heavy trailer can help with that. But 100% of the time when I'm casting a vibrating jig, I want it to have a trailer. One huge difference to know though between these two is in the retrieve speed potential. What I mean by that is how fast or slow they can be retrieved with still keeping their action the same. A spinnerbait has a much broader range. I'm talking slow to fast at which it can be retrieved and still look good, as opposed to the chatterbait. Chatterbait is good for a kind of a medium to medium fast retrieve. If you start to slow crawl this thing, there comes a point where the blade actually doesn't grab enough water. It can't actually vibrate. A spinnerbait, you have to almost like drag it across the bottom, and even then the blades are still turning at that point, and you can retrieve this thing ultra fast, and it will not burn out and turn over for the most part. Some spinnerbaits will, especially Colorado blades, but a double willow leaf spinnerbait, you can retrieve this thing as fast as possible, and for the most part, it will not turn over. So now that we've got all that baseline information in our brains about the spinnerbait versus the chatterbait, it's time to finally answer the question, which one of these two is actually a better lure? And to that I would say, stop asking silly questions. Comparing these two is not like comparing, say, a crankbait versus a drop shot, where there would obviously be very different situations in which one excels over the other. But there are three factors that I think you should consider when selecting one versus the other, and that is water temperature, the depth you're fishing, and the type of cover you're fishing these two around. Now for water temperature, this point here is purely anecdotal, but it's not just my understanding and experiences, it's the guys that I know and hang out with. We've just found a spinnerbait works better than a vibrating jig in the vast majority of cases in colder water. So at least for me here in Texas, anywhere from December through February, even into March sometimes, a spinnerbait is a better lure because that's when my water is coldest. I have found a single Colorado or a double Colorado is the best color I can throw. Just like the rest of the year though, a shad variation is still best for me in the winter, but I just think a spinnerbait, because you can fish it extra slow and super close to the bottom, is just a better cold water lure than a vibrating jig is. The next factor is going to be depth. I have found a spinnerbait, again, just like it can be retrieved faster and slower, can also be retrieved in a wider variety of depths. I think a vibrating jig is better at staying near the bottom, but oftentimes to retrieve it extra high in the column, you've got to reel that thing extra fast, which oftentimes is a little bit too quick for those bass to find and eat. So a spinnerbait, again, kind of depending on the size and configuration you make, can be retrieved super close to the bottom very well, in the column very well, and especially almost on the water's surface where the blades are like kind of chopping the top of the water. You really have more freedom with a spinnerbait to actually retrieve it in different depth zones. And the last factor is the type of cover you're fishing around. A spinnerbait vastly excels around wood as compared to a vibrating jig. And I say wood, I also mean other snaggy things like metal poles and just kind of stuff, maybe cables, stuff that's harder and more cylindrical, maybe has stuff shooting off to the sides, not necessarily grass, but really things that are super snaggy. A spinnerbait is better around. Now, you may look at the two of these things and say, Tyler, the hooks are basically the same. As a matter of fact, on these ones, the hooks are the exact same size and they are both pointed upwards. How is a spinnerbait more weedless than a vibrating jig is? And I'm just here to tell you, I've been doing this, making videos for 12 years, and I've been fishing for double that amount of time. I have just seen a spinnerbait to come over wood and snaggy stuff way better than a vibrating jig is. I think it's because the spinnerbait hits the blade area here and it kind of turns over and rolls over a piece of wood, as opposed to a vibrating jig where the area it first makes contact and the hook are a lot closer to each other. And so if it hits and rolls, it almost immediately gets snagged, as opposed to the vast difference in distance between the area it's tied on a spinnerbait and where the hook point actually is. So Tyler, the spinnerbait wins in all three of those factors you just mentioned. And my answer to that is yes, it does. But most people watching this video right now probably don't face those conditions, especially those conditions all combined, the vast majority of the time. I mean, I would say probably pond anglers, lake anglers, you're fishing a relatively open body of water. Maybe it's got some aquatic vegetation, but not a whole lot of brush piles or lay down logs. And you're fishing, and usually, again, fishing season is usually more warm water. And so for the vast majority of us, it's kind of a pick-em when it comes to selecting a vibrating jig or a spinnerbait. Again, if you have those conditions, a spinnerbait wins, but most of us don't fish that kind of stuff a whole lot. And so it's up to you to determine, or at least I say the fish, to tell you what they want on your body of water, because both of these can work insanely good. And lastly, two conditions that, despite talking about them in previous videos, I was actually wrong about are water clarity and wind. I thought that a spinnerbait was vastly superior in the past in terms of those two conditions, but I've had several days in the past few years that I thought the chatterbait would dominate, and it ended up that the spinnerbait dominated and vice versa. But one thing that does make sure you dominate out on the water is the Reaper sweatshirt from Infinite Outdoors. I've always said if I was gonna have a merch brand, I want it to mean more than just bass fishing, and that's what Infinite Outdoors is all about. There are infinite possibilities of making memories, having fun in the outdoors, hiking, fishing, hunting. That is one half of the meaning to Infinite Outdoors. The other half is that as a man of faith, I believe God loves us an infinite amount, that he would send his son to die on the cross to pay for our sins so that we can come to know him and be in a relationship with him. I hope these clothing items here are an awesome conversation starter in your life, and they're just comfortable and downright awesome. So we've got the AFCO Reaper sweatshirt. I've got a few of the super soft and comfortable pullover sweatshirts, and of course, tons of different hats. We have the classic stitched hat here. We have the leather patch hat, and I believe I've got white and red leather as well on a black hat. Supporting this brand is a great way to help this channel continue to grow, and it means a whole lot to me to see you guys repping this stuff out on the water in your everyday life. So I will leave the link to pick this stuff up down in the video description. But enough talking, let's get out on the water to test which of these two lures is actually better, the spinnerbait or the chatterbait. Now, when comparing a vibrating jig and a spinnerbait, you've got to keep a few things in mind. They are similar lures, but they are not the exact same. And so kind of got to take an on-the-water comparison of fishing both side by side with a grain of salt, because it could be that we just get to a better cast with one lure before the other one. Maybe the fish are just in a certain mood one day over the other when they want a spinnerbait versus a chatterbait, and we're fishing for a very unique style of bass today, farm country Minnesota smallmouth, which means they don't quite act like normal smallmouth bass do, which usually prefer a spinnerbait, at least in clear water, over a vibrating jig, at least in the Great Lakes regions. I'm not sure about the rest of the country. So take this with a grain of salt. Taylor and I today are going to attempt to make these things even when it comes to getting good casts to the areas with this lure and then this lure, and kind of switch back and forth. That way nothing gets favoritism. But again, this is just kind of the fun part of the video where I want to catch some big smallmouth on either one of these lures. And if one crushes the other, obviously we know, at least on this body of water, and maybe if you have one that's like it near you, throw one over the other. Enough talking, let's catch a bass. All right, first spot, super windy point. Should be a good location. Test and compare. Oh my goodness. Whoa. Dang. Whoa. Oh my gosh. Big smallie. Big smallie. Absolutely demolished it. Whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. Do we have a net? We don't have a net.
We don't have a net.
I didn't bring a net. Gosh, what a giant. Move Taylor's rod here. Man. Biggest one here yet. Oh, what a healthy fish. Felt like a stinking pike knocking it.
That's a big one.
Gosh. Yes. Oh. That's on me. You shouldn't grab the line. I should just keep playing that fish and belly him. That's like a 4.5, 5 pounder. Well, you know what? We saw the bass. That was a bass. That counts. 1-0 chatterbait. Well, you're not gonna win them all. That was user error.
How far out was he?
Not far. I don't know how deep I was.
Yeah.
Because the point kind of comes out like this. So I'm not quite sure where he was on the point. Oh, there's one. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Out on the edge of the point. Another nice one. We're just gonna boat flip you right in, my friend. We're not playing around unless you're big. Well, no, you're not as big. Get in here. Yes, sir. Beautiful smallmouth on the black and blue jig, or vibrating jig, should I say. Oh, what a chunky bass. Heck yeah, gorgeous colors. Thank you, my friend. 2-0, Thunder Cricket.
Well, Tyler's whooping my butt and I'm tired of losing. So I'm making a change to my spinnerbait to see if that'll make a difference. And I put on skinnier blades to see if I can keep it down deeper, a little easier.
All right, last cast. All right. Next spot. There's one. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Come on now. Now do better with this landing job, Tyler. Do better this time. It is really seeming like they are wanting the vibrating jig. Oh, is that it's smallmouth. Oh, it's smallmouth. Yes, sir. All right, we're gonna try to become a pro angler here and learn how to, hold up. Taylor, we're gonna suck in your dang spinnerbait.
You want me to hold him?
No, I got him, I got him. Gosh, you haven't made a long cast.
Yeah, I know I did.
Holy
it was right
cow.
at the beginning of my cast.
All right, now we're in. If I land this fish, it's a miracle. Oh, he choked it. He choked it. Get in here, baby. Get in. Oh my goodness, I'm so bad at this. I'm so bad. I got too much line out.
Yes, sir. Oh, look at that beautiful Minnesota smallmouth. 3/8 ounce, black and blue thunder cricket down the dome. Holy cow, he ate that thing. Wow, what a biggin'. And all we're doing is fishing these two baits over one long sweeping point, as you see here on the drone shot. So really there's no one cast better than the other. The fish just seem to be preferring the old thunder cricket today. Dunk my board, and I'm gonna add this guy to my Fishing Chaos tournament that I run all year long. Beautiful 18.5 incher. What a stinking beautiful smallmouth bass. Probably 3.5 pounds. They're pushing 4. They're getting pretty fat. Let's get this big girl back in the water. See ya.
I feel like this whole thing could be good.
This whole thing could be good. Maybe you'll catch one day.
One day.
Like at this point, we're just spot locked here on the trolling motor, casting at this point. Again, no favoritism. The fish just seem to be preferring this thing.
One thing I was just thinking about, you know, your chatterbait is riding closer to the bottom.
Probably.
And I can't get this spinnerbait deep enough to where they're hanging out.
1/2 ounce, 3/8?
I think it's a 1/2 ounce.
Okay.
But
You think they'd come up for the spinnerbait, but maybe they're really liking it to be closer to the bottom. Good observation, Taylor.
Thanks. I really think that's what it is though. Like if they were actually like up on the, closer to the bank on the point.
And these fish in here are eating bait fish. I'm not sure if these smallmouth are bluegill eaters, and so it should make more sense for Taylor to get bites, but he's not. Goodness gracious.
Oh.
Yellow. Right at the boat. Right at the boat. Oh my goodness. Right at the boat. Right at the dang boat. Big one. Big one. Get away from the trolling motor. Get away from the trolling motor. Can we do a better job scooping you this time? Whew, they're so aggressive and angry. Come on, get in here, baby. Not as big as the last, but a nice one on the black and blue. I don't even know what to say. Obvious, these dang fish want something chattering and not spinnering. Spinnering, that's not a verb, spinning. It is so windy. Holy cow. All right.
All right.
Got that point covered. All right, time to cast these reels upwind. Goodness. It is blowing. Another advantage to the vibrating jig over your spinnerbait is it casts better upwind. I mean, like, significantly better. This reel, folks, is magnificent. Highly recommend picking one up if they're in stock when this video drops. As always, I will have it linked down below. What you getting?
Last ditch effort. Another color change.
Another color. Maybe that will do the trick.
Maybe. I finally got a bite.
He got a bite?
I did.
We got a bite, folks.
Missed it though.
Ah.
So you know what that means? Absolutely nothing.
Nah, it means nothing. Let's fish down this bank a little bit just to kind of collect ourselves, because that was windy. They're so specific where they want to sit. All right, nothing really shallow.
Last spot of the day.
Taylor is right. As we arrive back at a point that we fished a while ago but didn't actually get any bites on, but I know fish live here. What a challenge it's been. I guess what an instructional video. The challenge part, at least as far as Taylor's concerned, not too good.
They don't like me.
Not today. Now, even though Taylor did not catch one on the spinnerbait today, that does not mean the spinnerbait's not a fantastic lure, because it absolutely is. But hopefully this video taught you some of the differences and similarities between these two styles of baits. If you want to watch a previous video I made talking about the vibrating jig, my vibrating jig masterclass, exactly how I rigged this thing from the trailer to the water depth to, of course, the rod, reel, and line, and all the tackle that I used, including this brand new awesome custom pro reel, will be linked down in the video description. Those are affiliate links. If you could shop for your tackle using those, it would mean a whole lot to me. My name's Tyler. As always, it's a pleasure, and we'll see you all next time right here on TRF.